Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Prospect Corner here at the Hockey Writers. I'm your host, Matthew Zator, and as always, joined in by my other prospect expert here at Dayton Reimer. Peter is on the IR for the week, but he will be back next week. We're going to be doing a bunch of, for this episode, we're going to, because the trade deadline is, what, are we a week and a half? Or actually, tomorrow it's a week. So as you're watching this, it's a week away. So trade deadline is coming up, and a lot of the time, some of these prospects are in these packages, and we're going to talk about a few of those guys that could be traded. But first, Dayton, how's it going?
Hey, it's not too bad. Just kind of one day at a time sort of thing. Lots of content to try to get through. On top of the deadline coming up, the WHL playoffs are also coming up here pretty soon. Most teams have about a dozen games left. And it's for the most part, you know who's going to be in it, but there's a few question marks on where you're going to fall. That makes things quite interesting.
Yeah, we'll do a bit of a preview for the playoffs and WHL to OHL and all that once Peter comes back. We're going to talk about some of the top prospects in that this season. There's some obvious ones, of course. We're going to be talking about that and do a bit of a primer too. And of course, the draft as we keep going, getting closer to that too. But since the deadline, like I said, since the trade deadline is just around the corner, there are a few prospects that are kind of maybe not in rumors, but speculation where some of these guys could be moved in some big deals, notable prospects being in there. So we're going to start and talk about a few of the Canadian teams because we all love talking about the Canadian teams here. And we'll start with the Edmonton Oilers. And this is a team that's, of course, in the playoff race, not just in the playoff race, but in the Pacific Division race. Struggling a bit right now, but most likely they're going to be making it unless they really dive bomb. And who knows? I mean, you never know what could happen. But as of right now, they're supposed to be a Stanley Cup contender. So they might be doing some upgrades. And the only kind of guys they could be trading, of course, if they do trade some roster players, it would make their team worse. So they might be trading some prospects to kind of, bring in a guy. And the guy that their top prospect is Matt Savoy. There is speculation where he could be on the move, where, to maybe bring in a defenseman, goaltender. They've had some goaltending issues. Dayton, what do you think about potentially Matt Savoy getting moved again? I mean, he was just acquired by the Oilers from the Buffalo Sabres. Do you see him being traded for something substantial now? Because the Oilers are kind of in win now mode.
Yeah. No, I think he's definitely a name that could be moved. He has been a very solid rookie in the AHL, so you could get, something back for him. It seems like the NHL isn't very excited about him, though, for whatever reason. I don't know. I just, he's never brought up in conversation, right? You don't hear people raving about, oh, man, Matthew Savoy. I think they should. He's got 37 points in 45 games as an AHL rookie. He's 21 years old. That's pretty impressive. I'm just pulling up the stats for the AHL here. So let's go under 22. He is 10th among players under 22 years old in scoring, that's great. That's a top 10 prospect of that age group, right?
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't got a lot of play time in Edmonton, which might hurt his value a little bit. Only 3 games. But I think this could be a piece that, a rebuilding team might be interested in, especially with the Oilers kind of set for the foreseeable future, really. I don't know. I want him to succeed in the NHL. He's a fantastic player. I think he won't succeed in Edmonton. I think there's just too much depth. So if they can move him for a supporting piece for their, hopeful cup run, then I can definitely see that happen.
one thing about Savoy, like they're of course speculation came because they're bringing him. They brought him up to the NHL as a call up in a weird, around the deadline. So they're like, oh, they're showcasing him. Maybe he can get on, show NHL teams that he's he's ready for the NHL. He had one game last season with the Sabres, didn't play a lot. I think it was under 5 minutes in the game, which really wasn't much there. Lately, he has been getting some time playing with Draisaitl, and looked pretty good with them. So, I mean, maybe they're trying to see if he can look like an NHL player, and potentially a team will call and say, well, this is a guy that we would want for a significant piece. I don't know what the Oilers, there've been talk about that. Of course, they're not looking for a goaltender, which is kind of interesting because, Stuart Skinner's not been very good lately. And then Calvin Pickard's more of he's just a backup. And, they might need an upgrade in goaltending, but there's rumors out there they're not looking into that. So the guys that they're maybe moving to get maybe a defenseman to upgrade the defense core. I don't know what their forward group. I think their forward group is pretty good. I mean, Victor Arvidsson hasn't really been what they thought when they signed him in free agency. Of course, they lost. We've talked about Philip Broberg and Holloway, two guys that are doing really well in St. Louis. Maybe they shouldn't have traded those two, or not traded. Not matched the offer sheet, where they decided not to do that, and essentially did trade them because getting rid of them. But yeah, it is interesting to see if they would trade Savoy, which is, I mean, their prospect pool is not very deep. This is the only guy that really holds a lot of value. There are some maybe mid-tier prospects they could trade. Sam O'Reilly's an interesting guy. I don't know if they would be moving him. So we'll see what happens with the Oilers. But I think Savoy's the guy that people are kind of looking at as being a piece that they could move away because of, you need to, of course, give up something to get something. And to get something substantial, you're going to have to give up at least a guy like that or a first-round pick, and which they do have as well. So we'll see what happens with the Oilers there.
Yeah. What might really help the Oilers is a 30-point guy. 14, 15 goals, 30 points. Kind of like Ryan McLeod with the Sabres.
Yeah, that's another guy they got rid of.
Yeah. Weird that he was traded for Matthew Savoy.
Yeah.
Now, like you mentioned, the Oilers don't have a deep prospect pool. Looking just throughout it, one of the only guys, Sam O'Reilly's there. Good prospect. Not a high ceiling, but he's a good prospect. Roby Järventie, he's solid. I don't know what his top end is. Brady Stonehouse, again, another guy. Jacob Perreault. It's a lot of question marks, and I think, maybe Bo Akey. He's pretty solid. He looked quite decent at the World Juniors, despite Canada's, shortcomings. But I thought he looked pretty good. Made the team. Getting rid of Savoy really hurts the overall for that. And if the Oilers are really all in, I think they're moving him for somebody who could play kind of that depth role, like a Ryan McLeod, right? But it also strikes me as kind of strange if they do move him for someone like Ryan McLeod, because they had him and then they traded him for Savoy, right? Oilers, I don't think have made a lot of great decisions with their young players lately.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So that's true. It's true. Bo Akey could be an interesting guy that they could potentially move to. I don't know. I mean, I think those two guys are the guys that they would, teams would be interested in, trading a big piece or mid piece to, have that in the package. We'll see what the Oilers do. I don't know. I mean, with McDavid coming up with his new contract, I would say they would want to win when he's, I don't know if he's on a lesser salary. I mean, he's going to be paid a lot more on his next one, but you want to kind of do something soon, or, McDavid might not want to re-sign. if they don't win a cup in the next few years, or at least in the next year or so. And they have a good chance of doing it. It's just, are they a good enough team right now? It's maybe debatable. So we'll see if they do any moves in the next week and maybe move some of these guys out. All right, let's move to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And we always have to, of course, I don't like talking about the Maple Leafs, but they are a team that's always in the conversation. Always making the playoffs, not going very far after that. And they're always talking around the deadline, any trades, they're always in the conversation. And again, moving guys, their prospect pool's not the strongest. They do have some guys that they could move on from. I'm not going to add Cowan in here because I think he's one of the guys that probably won't move. But they got other guys like Fraser Minton, Dennis Hildeby, Topi Niemela, 3 really solid guys that they could move to maybe upgrade for group, the defense, maybe. In my opinion, I don't know if they really need to do any moves. They've got a pretty strong team. But Dayton, what do you think about these 3 guys, or maybe some other prospects they could move to get a significant upgrade somewhere in the lineup?
Yeah, I mean, you always kind of hear about the Maple Leafs being in on whatever top player, right? And it also seems like more often than not, they get that top player and, he didn't quite work out. Yeah. Not always, of course, but there is that, it does feel like a gamble anytime they go in one of these top free agent targets or the top trade targets. Mm-hmm. And there is, I think, some spots on the Leafs roster that could use some upgrades. I think their depth is lacking. You don't really have a lot of trying to think of the right word. Skill isn't the right word, but just like the ability to support that really high-end top unit, like Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, those guys are doing fantastic. Like you're getting what you pay for with those guys for the most part. I know Tavares has had a bit of an off year comparatively, but still doing quite well. So I think when you're looking to add some of those depth pieces, you want to move one of your prospects for that, right? So I can definitely see the Leafs dangling some of these guys who just haven't had NHL time. Like I read an article today about Topi Niemela. He's been a top prospect for the Leafs for about half a decade.
Yeah.
That's wild. And he still hasn't gotten any NHL games.
Yeah.
He's been doing solid in the AHL, no complaints there. He doesn't have the biggest size, and Brad Treliving probably wants to add a bit more of that when going into the playoffs. It's something that he did quite often with the Calgary Flames, adding some of those bigger, grittier players. And that seems to help. So I think that's going to result in some of these guys getting moved. Mm-hmm. Niemela, I think, might be that top person to move just based on some of these other guys. Fraser Minton, he plays that in-your-face game a little bit. I don't think they want to move him. Mm-hmm. He's not going to be a top 6 player. I don't think anyone's tricking themselves with that. But like if you need to make upgrades, then Niemela would probably be the best player to move. Nick Robertson is probably on the move as well. Not really a prospect anymore, but he still kind of plays like one, if that makes sense.
It's true. He's still kind of in that category. Yeah. I think Niemela is, I've always been high on him. He's before, but seems like he's been in the system forever. Mm-hmm. And, in Finland, he was one of the top guys there. Anytime he was on, Finnish national team, always played one of the top defensemen. I think, now, like you said, now Treliving is the GM, I don't know what type of future he has in Toronto, because he's not the type of defenseman that he loves. So I mean, maybe there's a reason he hasn't been called up. With they've had injuries, they've had guys in and out of the lineup, but Niemela has never been part of any call-ups at all. I mean, he hasn't had a game in the NHL. He has played in the preseason, of course. I had a really good prospect series there against the Montreal Canadiens. Their defense, and then they added so many free agents with Chris Tanev, and who's the other guy they added?
Klingberg?
That was last season.
That's
I'm
right.
forgetting someone. Oh, Ekman Larson. Why don't I forget? They're two former Canucks. Oliver Ekman Larson, yes. They added too. So I mean, they kind of closed off any opportunities for prospects to make the team. They traded, of course, Liljegren, and then Sandin last season. I think Niemela is probably not going to be a Maple Leaf. I think if he's going to be in the NHL, he's going to be somewhere else. And I could see him moving for sure. I don't see Minton. Like I said, I think he is a guy that really fits the Maple Leaf system. And now how they want to play, Berube probably a fan of his. And for Hildeby, I don't know. Now that Joseph Woll has seemingly established himself as an NHL goaltender, and then Stolarz is here for a bit. I think he's kind of closed off as being the third string goalie. So he could maybe be a guy moved. So I don't know. I think Niemela is probably the top target to be, in any deal. If it's involving prospects, I think he could be involved for sure.
Yeah, outside of Minton and Cowan, Niemela is going to get you the best return. I think those other two guys would get you a better return because they have shown that they are like top-end prospects. But yeah, like you said, I think they fit really well with what the Leafs are trying to do right now. Minton has that strength, that size. I would imagine that, Berube is a big fan of his.
Yeah.
Playing in the Western Hockey League does have some benefits, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It can be a bit of a gritty league. And Minton has already 24 games under his belt, 13 points in the NHL. Or no, sorry, that is AHL. Whoops. I know he's played NHL games. 15 NHL games, 4 NHL points. There we go. That makes a lot more sense. But still, he's getting those opportunities.
Yeah.
Have the wrong screen open. I'm one of those guys who has like 17 tabs up at all times. I think I shared one of those images on the Slack at one point because that's how I do research.
Yeah, lots of stuff going on. I think we'll see. We'll see if any of these guys move. I really think it's Niemela is going to be the one. I don't see Easton Cowan being traded. He's their top prospect. I think they have some really big plans for him coming in. So I mean, and of course, a lot of I think they will be making some moves. They always seem to around the deadline. So I don't know if prospects going to be involved, but to get something, you need to trade some of these guys. So Niemela could be one of them.
Yeah, if Cowan is moved, that's going to be like a blockbuster. That's the only way.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, he's a blue chip prospect, even though a lot of people didn't think so when he was drafted in the first round. But he's definitely established himself as that now with that big streak that he's got in the OHL, right?
Just doesn't stop scoring.
It's just insane. So we'll see what he can do at the NHL level. At times, in the preseason where he almost made the team, he did look like an NHL player. So I think he's close. We'll see when he gets that time. All right, let's move on to the Winnipeg Jets, another team that's one of the top teams in the league. And they're on a 11-game winning streak right now. And they could be looking at making some moves, even though, a lot of people think their weaknesses down the middle and they don't have a second line center. Well, it doesn't seem like that's a problem. Will they move guys like Brad Lambert, Billy Hanola? Again, we were talking about Topi Niemela being in the system forever. Here's another guy. Hanola's been seems like he's been there forever. And then Brad Lambert hasn't really been very impressive since being drafted. Of course, being one of the top. At one point, there was talk he could be first overall. Didn't end up that happening, and his stock is kind of on up and down lately. Do you see Lambert or Heinola being in a move that the Jets could make to maybe upgrade that to second line center? Or I think that's their only real, if you want to call it a weakness, it hasn't really shown that. But do you see one of these guys being moved?
I don't, but for like opposite reasons. I think Brad Lambert still has a lot of potential. He's leading the Manitoba Moose in points, 24 points in 40 games. Like, that's not fantastic, but based on the scoring, I don't know if the Manitoba Moose are doing all that great in the AHL. They don't have a lot of scoring depth. He's one of the guys who can bring that. And there's a few guys in their system who could be, kind of on their way to being a top offensive producer. But right now, Brad Lambert is kind of that top guy. I don't think they want to move on from him yet. He wouldn't bring you an Easton Cowan type return, but I think that's probably what they're looking for. So I don't see them moving him. Ville Heinola, I don't think anybody wants him. I think his absence from the Finnish Four Nations team is kind of a big black mark on his resume. He's not getting almost any interest from anybody. You got Nick Mattenpalo in the Finnish team before him, who's only been in North America for 2 years? Maybe 3? I'm not remembering entirely right now how long he's been with the Senators, which is bad because I write about him a bunch. I'll pull it up. Here it is. Yeah, this is his second year in North America. I was right.
Yeah.
Trust my gut. And he looked really solid, right? He's not an offensive producer like Heinola is expected to be, but he plays that really solid defensive game, which made him a good choice for the Finnish national team. Who's taking Heinola after he wasn't selected? He's only got a point in the NHL this year. He's not playing a lot of games. Only had an AHL point as well. That's all he has. Like, do you want a 7th round pick for him? I think that's probably all you're going to get. Like, he's kind of stalled out in his development, which is really sad. He was a great prospect when he was drafted. And I hope that, somebody would give him another chance. Because he's got a lot of really good skill. But it's just not working in Winnipeg. So if they want to move him, I think it would just be doing him a favor. Otherwise, they probably let his contract expire and ask if he wants to be a 2-way 1-year deal. I wouldn't imagine. If he's not moved, I think he's going back to Finland.
Yeah, and he's also had a lot of injury problems too, which that always sets some of these prospects back, and then they always have to try to move. Know that way too much here in Vancouver with Olli Levy. It seems like he's following the same similar path. Lots of injuries, can't seem to get a hold in the NHL. And it seems like he could be, like I say, moved in similar like a Levy type trade. Very underwhelming, just to try to give him some other opportunity. Unfortunately, that never really materialized anywhere else either for him. I don't know. Heinola could be moved just to try to get him going somewhere else. I think the Jets have a lot more prospects in their system that are kind of maybe eclipsing him. Even guys on their roster have kind of taken his spot, really. And they really didn't have. I think if he didn't get injured at the beginning, I think it was the preseason that he got hurt, and he was supposedly going to maybe make the team as a regular, and that kind of got derailed really early. So I don't know. It's unfortunate for him of how he was really high end prospect, and he's kind of fallen into that maybe, I don't know, bust territory already. Yeah. We'll see.
No, that's a tough one. I was doing a little bit of math while you were talking. He's never played more than 58 games in a season.
Yeah. So there you go.
In his entire career. Like
Yeah.
going back into his early finish days, at least on Elite Prospects, they don't have anything higher than 58 games.
Yeah, he hasn't. I know the injury history for sure has been there.
Yeah.
I don't. It was a pretty serious one. This last one, or was the one before that? He's had a few. He's had a few issues. So hopefully, he can stay healthy now and maybe get something going. I don't know if it's going to be in Winnipeg, but we'll see if they move him for something. Like I say, it won't be a huge deal, but they could maybe give him lifeline somewhere else.
Either a 5th round pick or like someone that is of a similar, struggle, I guess. I should also correct myself. I wasn't including international games, just regular season games. He's never played more than 58. So adding the international games will boost up some of those years before he came to the NHL in North America. But that's about it. So tough to develop when you're not playing.
Yeah, for sure. And then having to rehab injuries is just, it's not good. You can never get on a really smooth development path for sure. Okay, let's go away from the Canadian teams and talk about a few American teams. And I want to talk about the Boston Bruins because they're always, again, a team that's this year, not so much. They could actually miss the playoffs this season. And they haven't been very good. Of course, fired their coach. They've had some injuries on the back end. There's not a lot of talk that they may be doing something at the deadline. They can't really replace who they have, but I can see one prospect that could potentially be moved, and that is Fabian Lysell. Another guy that high-end prospect hasn't really established any foothold in the NHL, has been pretty good in the AHL. I've always been a fan of his ever since, of course, playing for the Vancouver Giants here. Do you see the Bruins moving Lysell? Because, again, he is probably their top prospect or one of them. So what do you think about Lysell, potentially his future in Boston?
I think this was the season that he needed to make the team or get some appearances. And the fact that he hasn't, I think, shows that he's not part of their plans. This is probably one of the weakest Bruins teams we've seen in a while. That's a team that should be bringing up some of these young guys, right?
Yeah.
And Lysell is not one of them. I think he's on the move. I think a lot of teams would be interested in bringing in a guy like that. I've written about how the Senators could use somebody like that, give him a second chance, boost their wings depth and provide someone who's fast and can score. Yeah, I don't know if he's going to a playoff team, but if the Bruins want to remain competitive and try to do a little bit of a push at the end of the season here, Lysell would be a great chip to add some grit, some depth, or potentially even an underrated NHL winger or forward, I guess, whatever they need. So no, I think Lysell would certainly be on the move unless the Bruins decide we're rebuilding and we're going to try to rebuild around some of our guys like Lysell.
Yeah.
He's not a cornerstone piece, but he could be a very good supporting piece. Using the Senators as an example again, it's like he's not a Tim Stützle or a Brady Tkachuk, but he might be a Josh Norris or a Drake Batherson.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, like I said, I've been a fan of his for a while. I mean, he's so much skill and so much speed that you would think he'd be a successful player in the NHL. I don't know if he's been given enough of a chance yet.
No,
he hasn't played a ton. He's had a few games, but he's been mostly in the AHL. Isn't blowing the league away, but he is one of their, again, still a pretty solid prospect. And I think you said a lot of teams are going to be interested if they do put him on the market as a guy that they are willing to move. I think to get anything substantial, he would have to be in any deal. it doesn't sound like they're going to be doing anything big, according to any of the rumors that have been around. Because of their losses on defense, they would have to do something pretty substantial to replace them. So, I mean, I think Lysell, if he is moved, I think it's probably not at the deadline here, probably in the offseason. But you never know. I mean, at the deadline, there are some interesting guys moved. I always go back to Cody Hodgson way back with the Canucks at the deadline, that no one expected him to be on the move, and they traded him. So anyone can be moved at any point, and we'll see if Lysell's one of those guys.
Yeah, that Cody Hodgson trade was. There's a lot going on with that move. And I did a little bit of research into it back a couple of years ago, I think. Maybe not quite that long. But I don't think he deserves the title of bust because he sort of ran out his welcome. Not really welcome, but he seemed to have rubbed some of the Vancouver Canucks the wrong way, at least the management. And they're like, yeah, we're done with you, even though he was a fantastic player. And then a nasty condition, a back condition, sort of ruined his career. I think he could have been a fantastic player had there not been those two things. Like, he wasn't given a fair shot.
There's one guy I was really excited about. It's one of those impact things that I remember when it happened. I was in class, and I was like, Cody Hodgson was traded. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like he was really good at that season too, and traded him for. I mean, Zach Kassian was never really that guy in Vancouver. I mean, he was good when they got there, but then after that, he kind of. We all know what Zach Kassian became. He was a good depth guy, but not a guy that you'd be wanting to trade a blue chip prospect for.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. So
nobody liked him in Vancouver for various reasons. If you want to find out, just Google Cody Hodgson, not a bust.
Yeah.
My article should come up and you'll get all the information you need.
Take a look. I mean, I think, there's something with him. I mean, I really liked him as a prospect. So we'll see. I don't know if and it was at the deadline. I think it was on trade deadline that trade happened. And it was just came out of left field. No one expected it. And lots of has gone down with critiquing that trade since. And maybe that's a good episode to do. Past prospect trades and how they went. But we may do that. All right, let's go to the New Jersey Devils and talk about two guys, Simon Nemec, who has been in trade rumors. Seamus Casey, maybe not so much, but he could potentially be in there too. Their defense core is quite deep, prospect-wise, and of course in the NHL with how many young guys they got. Do you see one of these guys getting moved? I would say probably one more than the other, but what do you think about these two?
Yeah, the fact that Nemec is on trade radars or trade bait lists now is kind of wild because they went hard after him at that draft. He was second overall, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Behind Slavkovsky. And hasn't adjusted to the North American game quite as nicely as maybe they hoped. He's been doing great in the AHL. Oof. What do you do with someone like that? You want to keep someone like that, obviously. Mm-hmm. He's a fantastic prospect who could be a fantastic NHL defenseman. But he's annoyed with his deployment. The Devils don't really have a lot of room for him if he's going to struggle when he comes up. Mm-hmm. Yeah, do you try to go all in, move him for either a middle six or even a top six forward? I don't know if the Devils need that. I could see him being moved. I think the Devils could make an aggressive trade like that. I think it's risky, like super risky. I don't know if you win a trade like that, but I can see him being moved. Seamus Casey, I think they probably want to hold on to. You mentioned him, right?
Yeah.
I thought you did. I think, one is probably going to be moved, not both. That would be kind of giving up on a large part of your prospect decor.
Yeah.
And Casey has, I think, some more time ahead of him before he makes the NHL, whereas Nemec probably should be pushing for that spot. And the fact that the Devils haven't found a place for him, or he hasn't proven that he's ready for that, might mean that there is a parting of ways.
Yeah, I think with Nemec, it's I wouldn't have thought he'd be on trade radar so soon after they drafted him. But there, the talk about him saying, well, he shouldn't be in the AHL, he should be in the NHL full time. He didn't formally ask for a trade, but it sounded like he wants to be in a better situation. I think if they do trade him, there's a lot of teams that would be very interested because he is a top prospect in the NHL and has already shown he can play in the league. And like you said, the AHL, he's already been dominant there too. I think he's an NHL defenseman. It's just, do the Devils have the ice time that they can give him? Their top four is pretty good with what the guys they brought in free agency and Dougie Hamilton back. I don't see a lot. And then, of course, Luke Hughes getting better every game too, being that top four guy. Is there room for Nemec to be a top four guy in the future? I don't really see it at this point. So the ice time that he seems to want, is it there in New Jersey?
And it doesn't help that Seamus Casey is outperforming him this year.
Yeah.
He's already got 10 games, 4 goals. Like that's pretty good for a rookie, a 21-year-old defensive rookie.
Yeah.
Man, it's tough to make a case that Nemec should be in the NHL with the Devils. It's quite an easy case that he should be in the NHL, though.
Yeah. It's just, is it going to be in New Jersey? We'll see if they do move him. And if it's going to be now or later on. They do want to make some upgrades. There's been talk about them trying to get, maybe some more forward depth. I don't think there's talk about defense. I think they're pretty set there. Markstrom's had some injury problems this season. I don't know if they're going to really do anything with the goaltending. I think it's going to be forwards that they will try to get because, dealing from position of strength is always what you want to do. And that their defense, they've got a lot of good, solid, young defensemen, and they can afford to trade one of these guys and still be pretty solid. So, and it's interesting. They could trade Nemec and still have a pretty good, pool of prospects on defense or young players on defense. So, yeah, that's why I think a lot of people were surprised they did draft Nemec second overall because they had Luke Hughes already, and then Casey's kind of come out, maybe not out of nowhere. He was a pretty good guy, but not a high end. So, yeah, we'll see what the Devils do. All right, finally, we always have to talk about the Vegas Golden Knights because they always trade their prospects. They're probably the one team that trades almost every one of them. And Brendan Brisson is the only guy really that's stuck around for many years since his draft year, which is interesting because they've already traded their guy they drafted not last season, not in the 2024 draft, but the 2023 draft. And he's been traded twice, I think, since. So do you see Brendan Brisson being the latest prospect traded from the Golden Knights?
Well, if it's not him, it's going to be someone else.
Yeah.
The Golden Knights trade everybody. Like, they don't keep their first round picks because they know they can get somebody who's very good. And then, they'll just move him for someone that they need.
Yeah, they're not shy, that's for sure.
No, not at all. I'm just looking. Oh, yeah, David Edstrom was their 2023 first-round pick. And he got
traded
moved.
Since, too. He traded to the Sharks, and the Sharks traded him to Nashville.
Right, that's how it went. Yeah, he's going to probably be a great player. Good young centerman. No, I think it's a matter of time, and not an if, but a when. Golden Knights prospect gets moved. Brisson probably has the highest potential of anyone left, unless you throw Trevor Connolly into there. I don't know if they move him immediately. Yeah. But how much value does Brisson have at the moment? Because he's not the biggest forward. He's played 9 NHL games, 0 points, only 16 points in the AHL this season in 43 games. A bit of a step back from where he was last season. Last season, he had 8 points in 15 NHL games, 38 points in 52 AHL games. So he doesn't look like he's going to hit those totals this year. Does that decrease his amount that he would get back in a trade? Because I think if he's not getting the Golden Knights much, they're not a team that just moves somebody for the sake of moving him, unless you include Marc-Andre Fleury.
Yeah.
There always seems to be a method to the madness.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're not going to just give him away. But what's he going to get you,
It's true. Yeah, I mean, there's I don't know who else. That's the thing. I mean, what other prospects could they move? Like Trevor Connolly, maybe, but does he have huge value at this point? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they'd trade. I mean, they did trade Edstrom quite soon after they drafted him. So I guess I can't say, they wouldn't trade a guy like that, just after they drafted him, right? Maybe they could do it.
They've done it several times.
They've done it many, many times. And like I say, Brisson hasn't been in the system for long. I think he was drafted in 2022, 2021.
Brisson, 2020.
2020. See, he's been in the system for a while. Like I say, the longest probably of any other prospect they've had. So either they have tried to trade him and haven't gotten any takers. Is it a good? I'm gonna say, is it positive that he hasn't been traded, or is it a negative that he doesn't have a lot of value? That's why he hasn't been traded.
That's a great question. Like, how do you know with the Golden Knights? How do you know? I might say it's the latter rather than the former, just because they've traded everybody else.
Yeah.
And he's not playing significant NHL games, so maybe there aren't any takers for him right now.
Yeah, he's played 9 games this season. No points, -3. You mentioned the 15 games he played last season. Looked like he was going to have a spot on the team, and he did make the team out of training camp. Hasn't really lit up the AHL, so his value is probably not very high for to get something big. He might be involved in a package if they do make that a crazy trade on the deadline like they did with Hurdle. No one saw that coming. Everyone thought, the Golden Knights aren't going to do anything at the deadline this season. And guess what? They turned around and get Thomas Hurdle in that huge trade. I think it was in the last hour, or it might have been after the deadline passed, and it was one of those that trickled in type trade. And that's eventually did happen. So they could end up doing something like that big and have him as part of a package. But I think if they do move someone, he could be there. But value-wise, I don't know how high he does have. All right. Dayton, you have anyone else that you want to mention that's kind of burning a hole in your brain that you think could potentially be a trade target for a team?
I wonder if the LA Kings are going to move one of their goalie prospects.
Yeah.
Because they've got quite a few who have pretty high, value or potential. And the Kings are in a playoff spot. They're 3rd in the Pacific Division. Do they want to upgrade either forward or defense? And then they could move either Carter George or Hampton Slakinski or Eric Portillo. all those guys could get you a decent return. Especially George. Like, that's somebody who could get you quite a good return after a solid World Juniors, despite Canada's shortcomings, as I mentioned earlier with Bo Akey. He looked really good in the moments that he played. And so I bet you that a lot of people would be willing to take risk on him. Goalie prospects seem to get moved semi-frequently, especially when they're quite young, if they've got high potential, because you know that they're going to take a long time to develop. Slakinski and Portillo are much closer to making an impact in the NHL or AHL. I don't think they have any, like, they definitely don't have any AHL. Oh, Portillo has one. And he was good. He won the game that he played. Hasn't been as good with the Ontario Reign this season, but he's got a good history. They acquired him in a trade with Buffalo. And then Slakinski, he's still in university, so a ways away. What is he? Yeah, he's just a freshman with Western Michigan.
Yeah.
Not playing a ton, but when he does, he looks good. Also on the U.S. World Junior team. Again, didn't play a ton, but when he did, he looked really good. So, maybe Slakinski or George gets moved.
Yeah, I mean, they're for goaltending. I mean, they're not the deepest in the NHL, I guess. I mean, Darcy Kemper, they did get back. David Riddick, they're both veteran guys. I think Portillo's the future in the crease, so I don't know if they're moving him. But Carter George or Slakinski could be moved, because that's 3 goaltenders now deep. I think, I say, I don't know if they're moving on from Portillo, but I could see one of those goaltending prospects being part of the deal if they do want to upgrade anything. They did just trade Tyler Madden. I thought he could maybe be one, but we was just traded to the Wild. So, and former Canucks prospect, I traded in the Tyler Toffoli deal way back when, which I was really actually upset about, especially when the Canucks did not re-sign Toffoli and then Madden was gone for nothing. He hasn't really done anything NHL-wise, but I thought he could still maybe do something. Now he's been moved again, so I don't know. He might not turn into anything. But yeah, I think the Kings could maybe move some prospects to see what they could get. All right, let's finish the show and go away from trades and talk about our prospects of the week to finish the show here. So Dayton, who do you have to highlight here?
I'm going to go with Leo Solin Wallenius. Or Leo Solin Wallenius? Try to pronounce it correctly. He had a fantastic game today against Rogla in the Swedish Hockey League. And if you look on Twitter, there is, he's got 2 fantastic plays. First, he scores a goal pretty much behind the net. A weird bounce comes in off the goalie's foot and gets him a goal. Helps tie the game, by the way. And then he is instrumental earlier in the game, just using that size and that strength, that patience to set up a play, create space, passes it to the guy in front of them. And yeah, they get the goal to take the lead earlier in the game, 2-1. So this week, I am picking the San Jose Sharks pick, the second rounder from last season, Leo Solin Wallenius.
Nice. Yeah, again, the Sharks have a pretty good prospect pool, and he's one of the guys that to keep an eye on for sure for the rest of the season too. I'm going to go with a guy we have talked about quite a bit on the show, and it's not a Canucks prospect. This is a guy who has not been drafted yet, 2026. You can probably guess who it's going to be. Gavin McKenna. He's on a 35-game point streak. I did not know how long that he has not. He's been just on fire for when was this last time he did not get a point? I did just look it up. It's 35 games. Last time he didn't have a point was November 2nd. November 2nd. And before that, he was on a point streak. He only had 3, if I'm counting right, 3 games without a point this season. So, yeah, Gavin McKenna.
His streak will come to an end, though, by the way.
Is that?
His streak will come to an end.
Has it already?
Well, he's suspended for the next 3 games.
It hasn't, because he hasn't. It was
True, I guess if he doesn't play.
It has.
Yeah.
But I mean, 35 game point streak. He's suspended for the next 3, but whatever. I mean, he's got it, that doesn't stop his streak because he just hasn't been. Yeah.
No, that's true.
But he has been a pretty good a black mark for the suspension, but he's still prospect. I forgot about that. I did see that.
Just saw it this morning that he got suspended. It's like, oh, that's not something I had on my my bingo card this year.
That's not the reason why he's the prospect of the week. He's my prospect of the week because of how many points he's put up for a long time. So he's got 102 points, 106 points, 106 points this season already. That's second to Andrew Cristal, who has 112. That guy's been insane too. He could be a prospect of the week every week. But Gavin McKenna, I think he's going to be the first overall pick in 2026. Do you see that? I think that's a pretty foregone conclusion. But suspension aside, Gavin McKenna, prospect of the week for me this week.
I mean, we have to throw it in, right? It just happened.
Just happened. It was so, but he's still been pretty good.
So good. Yeah. He's a big reason why the Medicine Hat Tigers are going to be a threat to make it to the final, if not win it all. They just have such a strong, deep team led by McKenna, who cannot stop scoring. Just like type in his name and you'll see some of the best highlight reel plays you'll see all year. He is doing massively incredible things. And you pair him with one of my favorite guys, Tanner Mollendijk. Yeah. That's just a deadly team. Like, I am excited to watch them and see how far they go.
Yeah, they're going to be an exciting team to watch. I mean, like I say, McKenna we've talked about for, 3 seasons? 3 seasons?
At least,
As 2026 is when he's going to be drafted. Next draft, not this coming one. And he is the ripe age of 17 right now. So, yeah, a good prospect, or generational. He's probably going to be generational. Gavin McKenna for sure. All right. Well, thanks, Dayton. A little bit of a longer episode. We just talked about a bunch of prospects that could be on the move from their teams that either drafted them or I think they were or acquired them because the Oilers acquired Savoy. Mostly drafted, but we'll see if anyone gets moved for pieces that could help teams now. And trade deadline is just a week away. So our next episode, we actually will be talking about, our next episode, we might be still before the deadline, but we'll see when we record it. We won't be talking trade deadline. We'll be talking draft and top WHL, OHL prospects when Peter returns from his stint on the injured reserve list. But we'll talk then. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on another episode of Prospect Corner.